Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel Russia in Context. The winter holidays are upon us and I don't know how it is for all of you out there watching, but for me, the part that I'm most excited about is the food. If I were in the States right now, I'm sure I'd have visions of Santa-shaped cookies, honey glazed ham, and most importantly, a coffee table full of finger foods, the most important meal of the holidays. But before I get too carried away with my gastronomic fantasies, I should probably remind myself that I'm here in Russia. And while different from what you'd find on tables across Europe and North America, the feasts put together here are something for me to be just as excited for. So today, let's break down what Russians and many people from former Soviet countries eat on New Year's Eve.
So as I was editing this video, I realized that there were still a few ingredients I had left to buy for New Year's dinner. So I decided to switch up, the scenery. I'd take you all out with me on a walk to the shop here. I want to use this opportunity to explain something that some of you might not know. Basically, in Russia and many places in the former Soviet Union, New Year's Eve is the big winter holiday celebration, not Christmas on the 25th. Eastern Orthodox Christmas actually comes technically on January 7th. It's celebrated the evening of the 6th to the 7th. But the holiday celebration here in Russia, with the big table full of food and all the family and the presents and basically everything, that happens on New Year's Eve. So if there was any confusion about that, I wanted to clear this up. Additionally, I wanted to add something not connected to New Year's Eve, just a general statement here, which is as this channel is just kind of getting rolling and starting, I realize sometimes the video quality, the audio quality is not going to be the greatest. As I work on this more, hopefully that situation will be taken care of. And additionally, with time, I'll potentially invest in better equipment. But for the meantime, as things are just getting started and I'm just kind of figuring this all out, I ask that you please be a little patient sometimes with the quality of the audio or the video. But anyway, we're not going to go all the way to the grocery store together, unfortunately. As it is right now, we're going to get back to the discussion of New Year's Eve food. So I'll see you back inside.
Let's start with the main dish, which obviously differs from house to house. Cooked chicken is something of a staple, fish as well, sometimes both. The Christmas-style ham, not so much. To be honest, I don't think I've ever seen one here in all my years, though to be fair, I haven't actually gone hunting for one. Turkey, however, is starting to become a more popular dish, and it's an interesting one to talk about. As there's no Thanksgiving in Russia, obviously, there's never been a holiday connected to this particular type of fowl. And as the bird is indigenous to North America, well, it just makes sense that it wasn't so popular here. However, there has been massive growth in the turkey industry in Russia, with a nearly 70% increase in production, and I would suppose consumption, from 2013 through 2017. Then another 35% since then. The market still has room to grow, but I'm not about to delve into the nuances of the Russian agro-industrial sector. Suffice it to say that turkey is kind of becoming a popular dish for New Year's Eve as well. Mandarins are a bit of a no-brainer, as their citrus compatriots, oranges and tangerines, are similarly associated with the winter holidays in the West. This is obviously due to a lack of fresh fruit in northern climes, and historically, those crops were ready in the south, kind of in time for the holidays. So hey, nice overlap there. However, as with all things in modern Russia, the Soviet Union has a role to play here. Beria, the beast most commonly associated with the NKVD, the precursor to the KGB, and the institution of the terror during Stalin's reign, that same Beria, in the 1930s, before he became infamous for a laundry list of inhumane activities, he was in charge of developing agriculture in the country of Georgia. And he was quite successful with it too. However, the output was still not all that much, and citizens could only buy them individually, not by the kilo. The situation changed in the early 1960s. In 1963, a Soviet delegation traveled to Morocco to discuss potash production. But as the story goes, one of the head party members on the trip was so enthralled with the local mandarins that gorging upon them during the trip simply wasn't enough, that he took a crate back with him and then looked into having them imported. Thankfully, Morocco wasn't a bourgeois country, and at the end of that same year, the first ship came to port in the Soviet Union from Morocco, carrying the fruits. Around this same time, Israel and the Soviet Union made a deal which would see more of the bright citrus fruits make their way to the USSR. See, the Soviets claimed ownership of various properties in the Holy Land that had previously belonged to the Tsar or the Russian Empire. In return for handing them over to the newly formed state, Israel agreed to supply the Soviet Union with textiles and Jaffa oranges, a type of mandarin. Couple these developments with an increasing supply from Georgia, and mandarins became more and more common across holiday tables in the Soviet Union. While the citrus's association with the winter holidays is less strong in the West nowadays, it's still alive and well here in Russia. Let's talk caviar. It's a food that's almost exclusively associated with Russia, usually of the black variety, in accompaniment with vodka. However, the red variety is cheaper, naturally more common, and a major part of the modern New Year's table. However, go back 100 years and no one, not even the poorest of the proletariat, would have been caught eating it. So why did it all change and when? Red caviar first came to the attention of Russians back during a prior period of imperialism, when they expanded into Siberia, the Far East, even Alaska. The native peoples there were known to eat the roe of red fish, such as salmon, but the association it had with native peoples was enough to make it a bit of a pariah dish. Another reason for shunning it was that there was such an abundance of black caviar in Astrakhan in the south, that there was simply no need to ship it all the way from the Far East across long distances when there weren't even trains yet. Finally, and probably the most important reason, was the taste. When it was first introduced from way over yonder, people didn't properly understand how to preserve or work the caviar, so it wasn't very tasty. A new method was finally discovered at the end of the 19th century, so hey, that problem was resolved, but it still didn't make the dish popular. That didn't happen until the years of the Soviet Union. The Caspian Sea started producing less asyotr, sturgeon, the fish that produces black caviar, and the party began pushing red caviar as a healthy side dish full of good fats and vitamins. It also helped to develop and support the fishing industry in the Far East, all of this happening in the post-war period of the 1950s. With regards to caviar, I mentioned that it is more of a modern dish, and this is connected to the fact that during the Soviet Union, it was extremely difficult to get, especially if you were not relatively high up in the party. So the association that people nowadays might have with red caviar on the New Year's table is a rather freshly minted impression. Selyodka pod shubы, which translates to herring in a fur coat, is probably the most exotic dish we'll be talking about in depth today, and the one that I personally have a rocky history with. First, let's start with what this monstrosity is. Simply put, it's a layered salad. At the bottom is the herring, with layers of onion, potato, carrot, egg whites, all that following, all the way to the crown of beetroot. Between the layers is a healthy dose of mayo for a final product that is as filling as it is punishing. I remember the first time I encountered this dish. It was on a cruise down the Volga my exchange program put us on over the fall break. One evening, this dish, selodka pod shubak, was the main dish, the main course for the evening, for dinner. And everyone was hungry because it was this cruising day between cities, so we had no opportunity to buy snacks or anything like that. So we all attempted to eat it, but ultimately couldn't, except one guy who was just going to town on it, right? Most of us actually offered our portions to him, and I have no idea how much of it he actually ate. But we were all mortified. Fast forward a decade, and I can confidently say that I was mistaken regarding this dish. Granted, I wouldn't want to eat it regularly or even beyond the confines of winter, but once a year at the winter holidays, I do look forward to it. The question, though, is where did it come from? The myth surrounding selodka pod shubak is that in the years following the revolution here in Moscow, a merchant named Anastas Bogomilov, who owned several cafeterias and public eateries in the center, decided he wanted to invent a new dish, which would symbolize the union of all the various layers of the newly formed socialist society. Herring was the food of the proletariat. The onion and potatoes represented the rural farming population. The beetroot, with its bright red color, of course, represented the Red Army, and the mayonnaise was a sly tip of the hat to the bourgeois. The fur coat part, shuba in Russian, was an acronym for Chauvinismo I Upadku, Boycott I Anathema. As fun as this story is, it's completely made up. Even Anastas Bogomilov is a complete fabrication. In reality, similar salads can be found in the culinary histories of England and Norway, and the specific recipe that exists here can be traced back to the Soviet cookbooks of the early 1970s, likely as a way to push the usage of pickled herring, which was available in large quantities in conjunction with readily available products. Why a fur coat, though? Well, I suppose if you squint your eyes enough or drink enough vodka, it kind of resembles one. Olivier, sometimes known as Oliver salad, or Russian salad if you happen upon it abroad, is the dish that is ubiquitous on New Year's and almost universally loved here. To draw a parallel to an American dish, it's a bit like potato salad, but still vastly different. The history of Olivier goes back to the mid-19th century, when French chef Lucien Olivier, who was responsible for the Hermitage restaurant in the center of the city, decided to serve up a salad which incorporated all of the most popular ingredients to both renew interest in the establishment's menu and give the people what they wanted. The original dish was this: boiled grouse and partridge breast with crawdad meat and sliced beef tongue off to the side, covered with Provençal sauce and a spoon of black caviar, then cubed boiled potatoes, half a boiled egg, and cornichons, these tiny French-style pickles that you find in the grocery stores. All of that lay in the center. None of the ingredients were mixed. The French chef took the original recipe with him to the grave, but variations remained popular in the city up until the Revolution, when it was lost like many things from the bourgeois era. Two variants of the original recipe still exist to this day, but we're not interested in high cuisine. We want to know about the dish that graces every table across this country come the holidays. Obviously, things are a bit more simple nowadays. The recipe consists of potatoes, chicken, and eggs, all boiled, and pickles, All of this cubed and then mixed together in a huge bowl with canned peas and an ungodly amount of mayonnaise. Just as with the selotki pod shubы, Olivier became a New Year's go-to during the late 1960s, early 1970s, as the required ingredients were readily available. This makes sense as the Soviet Union at that point in time was a planned economy, so they would want to promote dishes that they knew they were going to be able to produce ingredients for. As much as I would love to wax on and on about the joys of the New Year's table here in Russia and across the former Soviet Union, it's worth noting at least one dish that is widely loathed, yet still not a rare beast to encounter, like candied yams or jello salad. That dish is zaливная рыба.
Какая гадость, это ваша заливная рыба.
The clip you just saw is from Ironia судьбы, или с легким паром, otherwise known as The Irony of Fate, or Enjoy Your Bath for you English speakers out there. The film is something of a Russian equivalent to It's a Wonderful Life, and that well-known scene sums up my and many others' feelings toward the final dish that we're going to be exploring today, aspic. Aspic comes in two forms in Russia, zaливная рыба or холодец. The first is made with fish, the second from beef or poultry. For those unfamiliar with what aspic is, it's meat-based gelatin with pieces of meat and sometimes vegetables inside. The dish goes back ages, as gelatin is derived from bone marrow. By boiling bones for a long period of time, the marrow seeps out, mixes with the general broth. Then when it cools, it settles into gelatin. So maybe comparing it to jello salad earlier was kind of on point. This is hands down one of my least favorite dishes in Russian cuisine. Now, I've partaken more than once, and it's not so despicable that were I to be served it, I would refuse it, but I certainly won't be going out of my way to find it before me. The secret to consuming this abomination is applying hot mustard or horseradish liberally to assault your sinuses so unforgivingly that the sensory input from your taste buds is temporarily muted. Remember the odds Taylor Swift gave you about potentially getting back together again? Yeah, they're the same for how likely one of these dishes might grace my New Year's table. Before we wrap up here, I'd like to add one last piece of context to what I've said today. The New Year's table in Russia may seem like gluttonous overkill today, but it originated during the restrictive economic realities of the Soviet Union. The table was overflowing because this was the one time a year when such extravagance was afforded, often after months of saving away delicacies such as canned peas or pineapple, women having to periodically remind children or a hungry husband to keep their hands off. Those goods were for New Year's. And the size of the table was warranted, as wrangling all these various delicacies together required the cooperation of a few families working in tandem. Even today, it's quite normal for New Year's Eve to be less of an atomic family affair and more of a gathering of several different families. And with that, we come to an end of the dishes I'm sharing with you today. Obviously, the New Year's Eve table in Russia and the former Soviet Union can have many other different dishes on it, variations sometimes of ones like Olivier or selotki pod shubы. Sometimes they have their own finger foods. But regardless of what food people are out there eating or already ate for the winter holidays, I just want to wish everyone out there who's watching this video, happy holidays and Happy New Year. See you next time.